Hello everyone and welcome to this week's episode of White Wonder. I do hope that you are well. Today then, you join me on the trackbed of the Isle of Wight Steam Railway, specifically on the section between Smallbrook and Ashy, at the point at which it crosses under Ashy Road. This is of course the location of the only tunnel on the line. But when I say that, I am in fact lying, because this big imposing structure, even though it is 40 metres in length and certainly dark and gloomy enough to be called a tunnel, isn't actually classified as a tunnel. It is in fact a bridge. This then leads to a rather interesting question. If this is a bridge, then what exactly is a tunnel? And when does a bridge actually become a tunnel? I am then today going to try and answer that question, the one that nobody asked. But it is a tricky one to solve. After all, bridges and tunnels in the railway sphere are constructed using a multitude of various methods and techniques. But what exactly is the element which splits the two? Well, let's start by asking the obvious. Most people will remark that a tunnel is a tunnel because on the whole, a tunnel is longer. Perhaps then there is a threshold, a limit which our long arch bridge doesn't quite reach. But if that were true, then what is this limit? Well, there isn't one. No clear indicator for how long a tunnel has to be before it actually becomes a tunnel. On top of that, there is another problem with that argument, and it lays nearby, just on the other side of Ashy. I'm now near the foot of Ashy Down at its northern face over there behind me, and I'm stood on the alignment of what was once a short branch line which spurred off at Ashy Station. Now this branch line shut about 100 years ago and once served the popular Ashy horse races. But more importantly for us, its initial function was to serve a quarry cut into the side of Ashy Down. And over there in those trees is our problem. See, the quarry may have been dug into the side of the down, but between it and the foot of the hill was a busy road. So to reach the pit, our short branch line had to pass under said roadway. Today, hidden in the foliage, we can still see the remnants of that action. A portal for the railway line, long disused and now bricked up. On the south side of the road, we can see the narrow but deep quarry itself, where the now apparently filled in south portal of our structure is now hidden beneath a thick bed of brambles and nettles. From our north portal that side of the road to our south portal down there somewhere is a distance of about 40 metres, the same practically as our long arch bridge. But whereas that is actually classified as a bridge, this is documented as a tunnel. It even appears on the early OS maps indicated as such, even though there is no contrast in length, and it serves basically the same purpose, to duck under a main road. Without leaving the vicinity of Ashy then, we appear to have debunked the notion that length is the defining factor in defining the difference between a bridge and a tunnel. But in case you're still not convinced, there is actually a second example on the island which nullifies the theory. The pit in Shide on the outskirts of Newport is very similar to the one in Ashy. This too was served by a short railway branch line entering the site via a tunnel, and we can actually see it in use thanks to this old archive footage. This one likewise was short, likely shorter than the previous. But once again, open an old OS map, lo and behold, it is represented as a tunnel. That then pretty much proves it. So let's move on. I am now then underneath the roadway in our bridge, and as you can tell, the construction method somewhat of the way in actually changes from a brick arch to reinforced concrete and steel. In terms of construction, the bridge is actually in 3 separate sections. So you could argue that it is in fact 3 separate bridges stuck together. Is this then the reason for its classification? You'd be surprised how many bridges are actually constructed in this way. But crucially, it is also a recognised method in building tunnels. Not though for the most part. If we take a glimpse at a conventional railway tunnel, for example the abandoned one here at St Lawrence, we notice the structure has been driven through the landscape, bored continuously and then lined with brick or stone. However, though similar in appearance, if we head to Cowes and take a look at the tunnel here at Mill Hill, we may notice again a continuous brick arch. But essentially, despite its appearance, it was constructed in an entirely different way. This tunnel was built using the cut and cover technique, first used extensively during the construction of the Metropolitan line in the early 1860s. Despite this method though, the structure here at Mill Hill is very much a tunnel. In fact, the first railway tunnel built on the island. But of course it was one continuous arch. Again then, coming back to our bridge at Ashy, is the fact that it is structured in sections the reason for its classification. Well, not really. You see, over there in the distance is Ryde Tunnel, still in use today as part of the Island Line network. And Ryde Tunnel is most definitely defined as a tunnel. But from a construction viewpoint, it is a tad strange. From each end, it appears to be a double-bore tunnel throughout. But as you may have noticed if you've travelled through it on the train, the tunnel does open out into a single bore a little over 50 metres from the Esplanade portal. In fact, there are actually 2 portions to this open section. A long curved brick arch and a small length of reinforced concrete supported by cast iron columns. The renovation of this segment of tunnel in 2006 momentarily gave us surface dwellers a rare glimpse of this hidden underground edifice, revealing the exact point at which the reinforced open section meets the double bore. What we have here then is a very similar setup to our Long Arch Bridge in Ashy, just on a larger scale. But as we have previously proven, of course scale doesn't really matter. So how come this is a tunnel and this isn't? Well, it appears construction technique and sectorisation of the structure isn't really the answer to that question. And even if it was, it wouldn't really matter anyway. See, this section here is actually a later addition, reinforcement for when traffic got heavier over time. When the bridge was actually built in the 1870s, it would have been, as the name suggests, one long brick bore, from there to there. So again, So then, what's next? Now, as you may know, the Victorians, in building railways, weren't too keen on letting little objects, like hills for example, get in their way. And because of this unwillingness to deviate in agreement with the landscape, cuttings were often a feature. And where a cutting wouldn't suffice, a tunnel would be necessary. Whatever the blazes that is. Is a tunnel then simply defined by the geology of the land around it being higher than the portal and bore itself, therefore approached only by a cutting of some description? Again, a good try, but if this is a rule, there are of course many exceptions to it. Take for example the famous imposing cutting between Edge Hill and Liverpool Lime Street. This was originally one long tunnel built in 1836, but it was opened out in the 1880s to widen the running lines. However, there are still a multitude of bridges spanning the cutting, some covering over 200 metres of track and supporting entire neighbourhoods. But still, they are defined as a bridge. These structures are seemingly scattered all over our railway network. Even here on the Isle of Wight, we have a prime example in the form of the three-arch bridge located on the section of former railway between Shanklin and Wroxall. Now, even though the line is actually on an incline here towards the latter, it dives into this deep cutting on approach to the structure. And if, as we've proven, length is not instrumental in defining between the two categorical structures, but the lay of the land around the railway could potentially be, that would mean that this structure could be defined as a tunnel. But a tunnel it is not. Impressive it may be, but it is still just a bridge. Cuttings then seemingly have nothing to do with it. After all that then, we are back where we started, chasing our over-analytical tails. Perhaps then there really is no defining characteristic, no acute point of contrast, and the option is basically down to the company building the railway. In that case then, if it is down to the railway's pleasure, let's end by turning the whole narrative on its head. If there is no exact definition for a bridge or a tunnel, just one big long blurred line between the two, then surely Long Arch here at Ashy should be categorised as a tunnel. It certainly shows all the characteristics of being one. But I'll leave that notion with you. For now, I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you have done, please do consider joining our members club for $1.99 a month, where you can gain access to an array of bonus videos and other perks as well. For now though, thank you very much for watching as always, and I'll see you again very soon. Bye bye.